Welcome. I'm Pamela Rickia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Kelli and Rhanna Lincoln. Hi to you both.
Hello.
Hello. So I actually met Kelli online through our mutual friend, Anna Brown, which I'm sure longtime podcast listeners will recognize. I have really enjoyed getting to know her and her family a little bit through their online presence. And I thought it would be really fun to have her and her daughter on the podcast together so they could each share their own perspectives on unschooling. And I got to tell you guys, I was really thrilled when you said you were up for it. So to get us started, can you guys introduce yourselves and maybe just share a little bit about you and your family?
So I'm Kelli Lincoln, and this is Rhanna.
I'm Rhanna.
So my husband and I have been together for 31 years, and we have 4 kids. So Rhanna's our oldest. She's 22. We have a son, Thane, who is 17. We have a son, Emrys, who is 13, and a daughter, Gwyneth, who is 9.5.
9.5.
That's important.
I was going to say.
Only 2.5.
You're 22 and a half. Yeah. That's your half birthday. So we have quite a range of ages, which has been fabulous for us personally. I really felt like each of the kids got to have a lot of attention as babies, instead of, I never had all toddlers at the same time or anything like that, which I feel is better, even though I also might be a little more tired now because I've been parenting little ones for so long. So I am starting to feel tired. I have to be honest, but I also have bigger helpers now too. So we
take some of the pressure off of
it. So we're native Californians. We've always lived here. And well, we haven't always lived here, but we've lived all over California. We've moved quite a bit. And while Rhanna and Thane were little, for probably 8 or 10 years, we lived way up in the mountains, far from anyone. Population 81. There's nobody.
Tiny town.
Not a town.
Not a town.
When we first moved there, we would drive over an hour into Reno once every 3 weeks. We went shopping. It was like a totally different life.
Yeah.
And so, but they both reflect rather fondly on those years. We just sort of skipped over all of those concerns about socialization that homeschoolers often have. There was nobody to socialize with, so it was never an issue.
we had I think Thane and I had all of our elderly, because we lived with a bunch of retired folk, and so all of our neighbors were in their 70s and 80s, and so we kind of just grew up with a street full of grandparents who let us garden with them, and we had tea parties where we wore fancy hats, and so we were always surrounded. We spent a lot of time outdoors, but we were always surrounded by these older neighbors who totally just took us in and adopted us. And
yeah,
so that was
so
fun.
it was interesting how that worked out, because as unschoolers, well, the way it's worked in our family, at least, is our kids have always been equal parts of the family. They've never been a lower class citizen or had less of a say in what's going on in the family, really. And it was interesting living in that environment. Was kind of more of that. Everyone they talk to people of different ages very easily, like a lot of homeschoolers and unschoolers do. But almost even more so.
Yeah, they never treated us like we were any different. They were just which is funny to think back on and put that in a different perspective, being older and be here are these 2 little kids just riding their bikes who kept riding up to these old, and they loved spending time with us. But they never treated us like you little kids, or why aren't you in school? They just treated us like neighbors who were visiting them.
Yeah. So we did that for 8 or 10 years. And then we moved around some more, and then we tried moving up to the Seattle area for a while, and we lasted 2 winters. But
what was it? Too much winter?
Yes,
it's all winter.
We really liked it up there, and everyone. I mean, as Californians, everyone warned us. It rains all the time. It's really gray. But we're coastal Californians, so we're used to the fog, and we thought, big deal. We're used to it being gray all the time. But it wasn't the rain and the fog; it was the darkness. It was the latitude we weren't ready for. I thought that marked difference was something that happened like way up in Alaska or the Arctic Circle. I had no idea that people at that latitude were, it's dark at 3:30 and we're just like, ah. So anyway,
oh, wow.
It was surprising and we didn't like it very much.
No.
So we jumped into an RV and traveled the country for 3 years, and we did 38 states. And then we came back to Central Coast California, and we're pretty settled here for now.
Yeah, we were going to be here for about 6 months, and then me and Thane, my other brother, got really invested in being here. We were like, we don't want to leave.
Yeah.
We want to stay here.
So it's been almost 3 years now, and there's not really any itchy feet yet.
No.
I think we're staying for a while.
Oh, that's spectacular. It's nice to find a place that fits so well, right?
Well, this is where we, Abe and I, my husband and I, we actually went to college here.
Oh.
And when we were here 30 years ago, we would have loved to have stayed, but it's very expensive and difficult to find a way to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, when we had spent a couple summers on the East Coast, and I was done with the humidity. I don't know how people handle that.
Our life has been very controlled by the weather.
Yes. The weather is the deciding factor of everything. It's not just small talk. I will make life decisions based on what the weather is. So, but, to bring that back to unschooling, we've always had the freedom to do that. If I'm uncomfortable or I feel like why are we suffering through this? We've always had the freedom to just up and go, kind of. So, that's worked out pretty well.
Yeah. Well, so somewhere in there with your physical journeys to all these places, you discovered unschooling and made that choice for your family as well. So I was hoping you could share a little bit about what your family's move to unschooling looked like.
So I was very lucky in that, and a lot of it comes down to luck, right? Meeting the right person at the right time, or the right teacher, ironically. And so
we still need teachers.
Before I was even pregnant or anything, I became a doula. And I was really drawn to the whole birth community and everything long before she even came around. And so I happened to kind of be in the right group of people for a more natural approach to life in general. Yeah. And so all 4 of my kids were born at home, and the home birth experience was a really important one it's an important part of this whole journey, because to me, unschooling is just an extension of keeping things in my house, keeping my life in my house. So I chose to have children, and that makes them my responsibility. Not only my responsibility, but it's my privilege to have them with me. And it's not something I would want to give to a stranger. To spend my days with my kids is my privilege and my dream. So I want to be the one, most people are upset if they miss their baby's first steps or something, but I don't want to also miss the first time they read a whole paragraph or figure out, finally make their own batch of cookies or whatever it is. Like I wanted to witness that and be a part of it. And I also, my husband and I really wanted to foster a close family. And for us, that meant being close and being together and spending our time together, because we feel like that's how relationships, any sort of relationships need time and attention. And so for us, it was important that we stay together as a family and our siblings would know each other. Right. So unschooling for me was, and for both of us, was just an extension of home
birth and attachment therapy.
Of just, it just made sense. Like it didn't make sense to have this sort of autonomous version of the way things were. And then suddenly, because someone turns 4.5 or 5 years old, to
ship them off.
It didn't make any sense to us. We had pretty much decided we were going to homeschool before she was ever born. I remember being pregnant with her and having arguments with people saying, wait, what? You're going to do what? And so I think that I'm trying to remember when I heard, like, I know that in the beginning, so 22 years ago, there was a lot less, there were no Pam Larickias out there, you know, putting this kind of information out into the world. So I know that at first I thought homeschooling would look like school at home.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had any other way to visualize it, I think. But by the time she was 4 or 5 years old, that just seemed dumb.
Yeah, because I remember us doing workbooks and like sitting down and doing that more. And I don't really know what changed, because I do remember that, but I remember it kind of became tedious for both of us, where it was just like, why are we doing this?
What? This isn't fun.
This isn't fun. We could, because I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but we have a lot of fun together. And I kind of remember sitting down and doing the workbooks, and I don't remember exactly because I was little, but being like, this seems really tedious. Why are we doing this when we could be doing any number of other fun things?
Right. So I'm trying to think, I mean, obviously this was way before Facebook, and I remember there were some AOL groups.
Yeah.
And I remember coming across some of Sandra Dodd's writings. And whenever I read about just relax and let it happen, it made sense to me. Of course, I read all of John Holt's books, and people don't mention this one as much, but his Escape from Childhood book just completely blew me away. Like,
love that.
Blew me away.
Yeah.
Because it seemed so obviously rational. Like I that one really, really hit me. And I read that when she was pretty young. So just having a normal flow of the day, we never felt like we needed to interrupt that, because I could see that she was progressing as a human being every day. Right. So, so the whole thing was very natural. I know some people have a better story of like, and then this happened and we decided to change everything. And that didn't happen for us. The whole thing was really organic. And by the time our second was of any age to matter about like school, or we were already pretty much into into a flow. Yeah. It's just a flow. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, I love hearing stories where people figured it out that early.
I know. I feel really grateful. I actually feel like there's one woman, and I don't even know her name. I just think of her as an angel, who I met at a preschool of all places. Because before she was born, I actually worked in a preschool for about a year. And so there were all these 2-year-olds, you know, and there was this mom who would come at nap time to nurse her baby down for a nap. Like her daughter came to the preschool, but she always came in the afternoon to nurse her to sleep.
Aw.
And so we would lay there and she would be laying down nursing her baby and I would be on the other side. And she was telling me about William Sears and attachment parenting. And so I was exposed to all of those ideas before she even came along. And I wish I knew who that woman was, but because she changed my life.
Yeah.
It makes me all teary.
I know.
How lucky.
I know. Cause I mean, my kids were older by the time I came across those ideas, but they were just like this breath of fresh air. It was like, this is what I've been looking for. That's why things didn't make sense. And then, yes,
right.
The excitement of finding that. That's so cool. So, Rhanna, your days flowed. You remember workbooks a little bit. You were hanging out with the grandparents and stuff. Was there a time when you, started to realize, that school was a thing? And I was just wondering if there was a time when you were curious about that, or, because there's so often a lot of conventional messages about, well, you need to go to school to learn. Was there a time when you were younger that you were concerned about that, or did you chat with your mom about that, or how'd that go for you?
I don't ever really remember having a time where I felt like I was missing out on the school world. Because our days just kind of flowed and felt really natural. And I think especially when us living in the mountains, I was just a kid. Like we were really, I guess, isolated. In a way,
I can't argue that one.
I
just can't argue that one.
Between the ages of like, what we moved when I was 7.
I think we left the mountains when you were like
13.
13 or
so basically
14.
My child 13, there wasn't really any outside influences coming telling me that I was missing anything. I think like, sometimes in the winter the neighborhood grandkids would come back. That was the only time. And they would come up to visit their grandparents. And so I would play with them. But all I remember is I really only remember 2 who came up and they were so mean and so bratty. And, they were 13 and learning to cuss and doing all this stupid stuff. And I remember they were older than me, but I remember feeling way more mature than them because they were doing this stuff. So I never really felt like I was missing out. I don't really think the only time I realized that I had started to really realize that I was doing something differently or potentially missing out was in the past 3 years when we moved here and I started working pretty full time in a college town. And so all of my friends go to college and all of them go to community college. And that's the first time I started noticing that there was like a difference. But by that point I had already decided I didn't want to go to college. And I remember thinking that it was going to be like an issue, like you don't go to college, you don't go to school, you're on a different level. Nobody cares.
Nobody ever has cared.
Nobody cares. They go, oh, are you a student? And I go, no, I'm not a student. I'm just, and they, oh, that's cool. Do you want to go hang out? And you're like, okay. So
she's been to be honest, I was worried that she would have a hard time making friends here. But every single group, even the college groups of people have been so welcoming to her. They're like, we don't care if you're not a student here, come join us anyway.
They honestly, I have one group of friends, they forget that I don't go to college. They think they just automatically, they adopted me so quickly and just pulled me into their little group. And they're like, you should try writing for the college newspaper. And I was like, I can't, I'm not a student. And they're like, oh, that's right, you're not a student. I forgot. So I remember coming in thinking that was the first time it was really an issue because at least around my teen years, I had a group of friends who were all homeschooled. And so that was just our normal. And then I got out into the real world, I guess. All the world.
So they said.
The real world. And nobody cares as long as you're a good person at that moment. And, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter anymore. Where homeschooling was a label, I guess I kind of identified or used when I was younger. Now I don't even identify. We're all just people.
Yeah.
So.
And I and of course now things are different. So many people homeschool that, like my youngest, my 9-year-old doesn't have the same reactions from people. If she says she's homeschooled, well, like half the people walking around are homeschooled now.
When we were little, we go, we're homeschooled, and they would go, what's 4 + 4?
Well, I mean, sometimes they would get that. That's classic, right? Where they find out your kids aren't in school, so they start quizzing them. But I have to say that most of my memories of people asking her questions like that would say, like grocery store clerks and things like that. Well, why aren't you in school? When you say, well, I'm homeschooled, then they would just say, wow, you're so lucky. And then they would look at me and say, I wish I could have done that. Yeah. And so I think the messages that she was picking up during all of those years were that she wasn't missing out, that this was a fine thing, because she's listening to that and taking that in too, right?
Yeah.
So and most of the, honestly, like from TV or books or whatever, is all the kids going, I hate school, I hate doing homework, it's never any positive. I don't remember ever hearing any positive messages of, gosh, I love going to school, where I was like, oh man, I'm missing out. I just remember hearing all those. And this even applies today with all of my college friends who tell me about their classes at 7 a.m. and the hours of homework they have to do. And they're not getting any sleep and they're super stressed out. And it just makes me go, glad I missed that.
Yeah. But we would point out, like, even in Magic School Bus, those kids are in school, but all of their learning happens somewhere else.
Right.
Every single episode is them going out into the world somehow, but like going out and having experiences. And we would talk about that quite a bit. Like, you notice that, right? And then the kids would be like, yeah, I get that. So yeah. That was kind of a tangent, but.
Oh no, that's great. No, those are and we love the Magic School Bus. And we had conversations like that too. Actually, when we started watching it, the kids were in school, my oldest two, and they could see the difference right away. And then, so that was one of the fun things. I was around the ages too, I guess 9 and 7. When I discovered homeschooling, I discovered that they didn't legally have to go to school. That's how long it was till I discovered that. And then they came home and dove in. But anyway, the environment, same thing with that environment. It wasn't as popular or as known here when my kids were young. So they got the questions. The first question would be, is that legal? Basically.
Oh yeah.
But then once you said yes, then it was like, oh, that's so cool, and the kids are there and they're like,
a lot of times, tell me more, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Those were always fun conversations, right? When people were curious about it.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing I wanted to dive into, because you've got 4 kids, you've got 3 siblings, Rhanna. And sometimes it can take some time to figure out how to weave everyone's needs into the day, right? And that's something I think as people come to unschooling and they start to get move away from the, do what I tell you, from the rules, and they start to try to work together to figure out, what everybody's needs are and what they're going to do for the day or the week, or when someone expresses an interest in something new, how are we going to weave that into our family so that we can help them do those things. So I just hope maybe you guys could share a bit about what that process generally looked like for you. You want to start, Kelli?
Like everything else that I've described, it's very organic.
Yeah.
We definitely work kind of as a unit, as a tribe, a big amoeba of people. I don't know. And so it's not too much of an issue for us. My husband's job is pretty flexible. Obviously, the things I've described are
moves.
It's one of great privilege. I totally get that and acknowledge that. but he's been able to telecommute for years. So that gave us a lot of freedom. So if I have needed an extra hand to take someone to a class or something like that, that's always been pretty easy to do. So that's something I realize is not open to everyone. But for us, it's worked really well. So the kids, they'll have, what happens a lot of times is one of them will have a desire to learn something new, like an instrument. And then everyone wants to learn that instrument. So I have 3 of them playing guitar now. And so
I started that one. And now the 2 younger ones have surpassed me by quite a bit.
That's only because you bake all the time.
I had to start adulting.
So for that, I take them both at the same time. And also because our days are free, which means the teacher's day is usually free too, because the rest of the students he has are busy all for those 6 hours.
Yeah.
We have a lot more freedom to come and go with people.
Mm-hmm.
So organizing daytime lessons and things like that is pretty easy. It has been for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, there it hasn't really been an issue. It hasn't been too much of an issue of conflicts or people not being able to pursue what they want.
I think it works out well too, because at least maybe this is the age difference, the gaps between us, because I was able to get the attention and focus I needed. And then by the time and learn what I wanted to learn and kind of get into a routine, or at least start to learn how I was able to teach myself or be more independent on it, that by the time Thane was old enough to need that, it was really easy to meld his needs into what I already had going. And so we all had time to figure out our routines and our needs and how those gets met. And so by the time the next youngest one needed to figure that out, that was already really settled and solid.
Yeah.
Had a good foundation. And so it was easy to just build on that. And it also helps, I think, that we like each other and we talk all day long. And so my interests meld with Thane's interest, meld with Mom's interest, meld with Gwenny's interest, meld with, and so we're all interested in all of the same things. So we all just like to learn and bounce off of each other.
Yeah. We make an effort to be interested in what the other people are interested in too. So someone might bring something new, Pokemon or something, into the house and really want to pursue that as an activity or
an interest
or whatever. Yeah. And then we all make an effort
to support them.
Yeah. So, I see a lot of parents who are really disconnected from what their kids do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that or whatever. I feel, and I don't know if this is what has made our unschooling family successful or what, but I feel like it's my job to be interested in what my kids are interested in. It's not their job to be interested in what I want to know.
Because you can go and know what you want to know on your own anyway.
Well, right. But I feel like it's my job to do that. So ask me anything. I know all the Pokemon.
Hey, man, I can sing that song for the first 150 when my kids were younger. Yeah.
So would I do that on my own? No, I wouldn't spend my time doing that. But it has given me such a deeper connection with she missed that one. And not that example doesn't work for her.
I know, don't point at me. I don't know any.
She doesn't know any of it.
I missed Mimi Q. That's it. I'm done.
She did pick a favorite. But it has given me a deeper connection with the other 3 for sure. Because we can have long conversations about that universe and come up with philosophies and ideas that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do. And that's just one example of so many. I mean, we fangirl over all kinds of things together, books and movies, TV shows and anime or whatever it is.
Gosh, 21 Pilots.
21 Pilots, don't even get us started. And so
my son introduced me to them. Yeah.
They're so great. Oh my
Yeah.
God, I love those boys.
Spent so many hours the past few months. All me and then Mom and Thane ripping them apart and then looking up series online and then watching the music videos and read like hours.
But see, now if so we're unschoolers, so I don't really care about doing this, but a homeschooler would be able to fit that into so many categories, these long conversations where we're looking at lyrics like poetry and talking about symbolism and all these things, which I don't think it's important to necessarily categorize everything like that. But I can't even enumerate the number of educational boxes that were ticked through those kinds of passionate conversations we've had. And if I hadn't made an effort to be interested in what they were interested in, that never would have happened.
Oh, I love that.
That's the key right there.
I think so. I really, really do think so. I think sometimes people can be like, well, they're just they poo-poo their kids' interests because it's just their kids, right? But like you said right there at the beginning, it's about the connection. We're the parents. We're choosing to build this connection and relationship with our children, right? And by choosing this lifestyle, we're also choosing to want to support them in what they're learning. And how can you support them and help them along if you don't understand it enough to participate in a conversation, right? And then our world just expands like crazy, doesn't it? Because all of a sudden, when you see why they're interested in it, it's so interesting.
It is. It really is. And I think you're right that a lot of adults just immediately assume that because it's an interest from a young person that it's not
has no value
or worthy of that much respect. And wow, they're super missing out. They're missing out on so much good storytelling, so much.
Yeah, that was one of the things. Connecting with my kids is one of those big things when I was deschooling that really opened my eyes. I got rid of that judgment of learning, that learning some things is better than learning some other things. Because like you were saying, through one lens, through that 21 Pilots lens, you hit so much, right? You can learn so much. Yeah. That's the thing too. When somebody has a passion, when a child has a passion, they're like, oh, they're going to miss out on all the rest of the world. No, when you focus on embracing that passion, it takes you all over the place, doesn't it? It takes you from reading, writing, and history and geography. There's just so many aspects to any one little thing that you can see the whole world just through that lens, can't you?
It's so true. And, I forgot who the quotation is by, but, and I won't even try, but, how people say that that childhood is just waiting to be an adult, basically, where we look at it as a waiting period or a training period to be an adult, as if children are not already people. And that they're just kind of waiting and biding their time until they get to be a whole person. Yeah. And I've never agreed with that. I grew up on Kids Are People Too in the 70s. Kids are people too. And they're people right now. Yeah. And their interests are just as valid as an adult's interests and can be just as interesting. I think that our experience, our third child, my son Emrys, has epilepsy and cerebral palsy. And we spent 8 years in stress mode, just trying to keep him alive. He would have very serious seizures. And in fact, when he was a baby, the doctor said he wouldn't probably live past the age of 7, and he's 13 now. Wow. So our priority system is different than families who've never had that kind of trauma. When I look at my kids, I see this could be their last day. And do they want to have been sitting in a chair, learning about whatever stupid thing of the day. No, they deserve to have been having
a really good example.
I know.
And I
I can't. There's no good examples.
I was like, no, wait, I like that. No, that one's cool. Dang it.
Every day deserves to be lived doing what you want to do, following your passions, following your joy, because you don't know how long you have here. And wasting that first 17 years just waiting for the real life to start is such a waste, in my opinion. And so while what we've experienced has been kind of stressful and traumatic, and, it's left its mark for
10
sure.
0 would not recommend.
Would not, but there have been good parts of it. And I feel like having that different set of priorities in what is truly important, it is so much more important that I spend an hour and a half discussing a 21 Pilots song with my kids than it would have been for them to sit in a class full of strangers they're never going to see again. So, talking about the Pythagorean theorem or something, whatever stupid thing of the day it is, because we spend our time building connection that will last a lifetime. And I feel like there couldn't possibly be anything more important than that.
I love that. Right.
The end.
The end.
and Rhanna. Yeah, exactly. It's just a little baby mic. But it's so true, right? What's most important, not only the connection and the relationship, but what they're interested in that moment, right, Rhanna? That's where you learn the most, is because that's where your mind is. That's where your thoughts are. That's where your head wants to be, right? So that's where your questions are.
Yeah. Definitely agree.
Mm-hmm. I loved your point. I know. No, that's great.
Sometimes I don't self-censor very well.
But that point too about your ages, the difference in ages, and you mentioned how how your needs were kind of different, right, Rhanna? When you were younger and you needed a lot more help and attention, right. Just navigating your day, you pretty much had you as the first had one-on-one time with that, and you were more self-sufficient by the time thing came along, etc.
Yeah.
So that's another consideration, right?
Yeah, I think by that point too, I was, at least for me, because I had the biggest gap with all of them. I'm the oldest, and so I was able to not only be self-sufficient by the time they were around and they were babies, I was able to be self-sufficient in what I wanted to do or how to ask for it, but I was able to start helping them do what they wanted to do. Yeah. And so if Thane wanted to read a book and he didn't know how to read, I would sit there and read to him for hours. Or, it's even more so with Gwenny, who's the littlest, where we joke I'm her second mom, where she and when she was a baby in a sling, I would carry her around in the sling all the time and do stuff with her. And
she was 12 when he was born. So
yeah,
she's my baby. And I joke to people, besides the fact that I'll take her out in public and people will be like, "Is that your daughter?" I'll just be like, "Yeah." Well, for people who don't know, people go, "Is that your daughter?" I go, "No, it's my sister." But I talk about her. Yeah. Well, she's my baby and stuff like that. But I've been able to help be a part of their learning and their growing process, which builds connections between the two of us. Right. So Gwenny and I have a really deep connection, and we talk about all sorts of things. And she and I have little girls' days where we do our own thing. Where usually when she was little, it was just baking in the kitchen and listening to Disney music. But but it's like that with all of them, and they all have different relationships with each other too. Mm-hmm. So we all have our own individual relationships with each other and in groups. And
no, that's awesome. And that's the whole point, right? When everybody's doing what they're interested in and helping each other out with what they're curious about and interested in, nobody's trying to direct each other. There's so much more flow, right? Back to that flow.
Right.
Excuse me.
Exactly.
Now, let's get back to those RV adventures. You mentioned that you spent about 3 years out in the RV. So how did that come about? And I was hoping you might have a story or two to share with us about that.
Do we?
Great times. So many stories. So when we first decided, or in the early years, we talked about homeschooling, and even, like I said, before we were really in it. And we had talked about some grand ideas about really world schooling and really showing the kids the world. And then Emrys was born, and our lives were really turned upside down for a long time. And when we had finally gotten him stable and he hadn't had a seizure in over a year, finally found a medication, we started breathing again. And was that in like 2013 maybe? And we kind of like looked up and said, oh yeah, all those plans. And now she was getting older, and we never talked about her moving out. We've always kind of talked about living in an extended family and like her never leaving. But there's a reality to that I'm not sure that that's how it's going to be, right? And so she's 16, and I'm thinking, what if we don't have very much time left? And I know she's still here, but at the time, I don't know.
It's a constant joke. Someone will talk about moving out. I was like, I'll be here when you get back.
So we thought, our plan was never for Rhanna, and of course you can't plan for life at all, but we definitely didn't envision their childhood looking as serious as it ended up being. And because my husband was telecommuting at the time, we thought, let's get out and do some real living now, finally, and try to make up for lost time. And so we jumped in the RV, and it was really not that easy, but let's just say
we jumped in the RV.
We just, it's easy.
It just all happened magically.
Off the side of the road, and it's like,
So, some really interesting things that came of that, though, were one of the things I do in my side time is genealogy. And so a lot of our trip was family history focused, which was super interesting and took us to places way off the beaten path. We did a lot of big landmarks and stuff, but we went to towns that almost don't even exist anymore so that we could go to city halls and research what my family or our families were doing in the 1830s or whatever.
See pictures of their house, go visit their graves.
We remember that day that we went to all those
in New Hampshire?
No. In Indiana, when you and I did all of those cemeteries that one day.
Oh,
it was Halloween. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
So we're out in like the middle of nowhere, out by the Ohio River, and
that day. I was thinking still of another day.
We have a lot of
days.
By the river. Yeah.
And
by the spooky river.
Some of these places were not even cemeteries. They're like family plot cemeteries that are really in someone else's yard at this point.
Yeah.
That day was amazing because we got 5 of them in.
Mm-hmm. It took all day too, traveling back roads and like
it did
printed out maps.
And those are things. So by kind of letting our and I had done 10 or 15 years of work to lead up to that.
Yeah.
Where then we were able to go see a lot of these things, but that gave a structure to the overall trip that might not have been there otherwise. That made it super interesting.
Yeah.
You can tell them about our favorite place.
Which one's your favorite place now? Now I'm thinking about all of them. Oh, that favorite place. So our favorite place was Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
Which we don't have any family down there, unfortunately. Someone could have died and left me a mansion down there. That would be real cool. But no, we loved Charleston. I think we didn't even know about it.
We weren't planning on going there. I'd heard so many great things about Asheville.
Yes.
That because it's supposed to be like California East, sort of, really liberal. And, but when we got there, it was November and it was 16 degrees, which makes it, the cold weather makes RV living really hard because well, more than that, it's the condensation. Like, so when it's not that you're cold because you can be perfectly warm inside, but the walls are always wet and then you've got mold and then you're screwed forever. So you really have to keep the RVs kind of out of the cold so that doesn't happen. Otherwise we were having to chamois the walls like every day. It was just ridiculous.
Several times a day.
So anyway, we were like, let's go somewhere else. So we went to Charleston. It had never been on our,
it wasn't on our list.
Main list.
We kind of just ended up there because it was warmer, and we had been spending on average like a week per place. We ended up spending about 3 months total in Charleston.
Yeah.
Wow.
We stayed for a month and then we left and did some more things and then we came back and then loved it. Yeah.
And so it was really interesting because we kind of stayed like on the outside of the outskirts of town. And I don't even remember, you and Dad must have gone first.
The walking tour?
The walking tour. They have walking tours down there. They're free walking tours. And so I think you donate at the end or whatever. And it was so eye-opening because we went on these tours and into downtown Charleston. And not only is it just gorgeous and the mansions are beautiful and stuff, the whole environment is just so interesting. It's such a cool combination. It's a really beautiful, like, interwoven combination of the old and the new, where you've got downtown south of Broadway, where all the original houses were that were built in like the late 1700s. I mean, all these old houses. And then you go like north of Broad and it's modern and you have apartments, but they meld really well. Like, I think there was one day we were walking through this. I mean, you could just imagine somebody walking around in hoop skirts. It looks like you're in this there's the big trees and the moss and the mansions and the lavish gardens. Wow. And this was a Ferrari.
It was a Prius because we were talking about it being.
This Prius drives down the street, bumping music, and for whatever reason, it feels like those things shouldn't fit. Like this old, elegant town and this new, shiny, sleek car blaring modern music, and they just it made perfect sense. It was beautiful. It was really like, this is how it's supposed to be. And so we ended up throwing ourselves into the Charleston. We read so many books. Mm-hmm. We did all the tours. We went to all the museums. And then we just spent hours
just walking.
It's one of our favorite things to think about if we get stressed and you're think of a calm place, is walking around the cemeteries in downtown Charleston on a Sunday, because everyone was in church in their finest.
They dress up. It's amazing.
And it's all these rich old families that have been there forever, since the beginning. Yeah. And so on the tour, they're like, oh, there's Mrs. So-and-so. Her family's been here for 300 years. And there's so-and-so and her daughter. She's getting married next week. There's this strange community about it.
Feel, yeah.
But it's unlike anything else that we'd ever experienced. And so that was...
So we follow all the Instagram Charleston pages and still fangirl over.
And there was, there's buildings that was this was brought over during Queen Elizabeth's reign. And
well, she and I have always really loved history. I mean, just the two, that's one thing that she and I share probably
the most.
Over the other kids don't care so much.
We're history buffs.
We read historical novels together and love that kind of stuff. And it was great seeing a lot of the United States, but we don't have super old things here.
Yeah. And our history love lays with older, mainly
usually
English, older stuff.
Yeah.
I hadn't ever really cared about.
Or archaeological, super old.
And before this trip, I had never really cared about American history. That was something I was it didn't interest me at all. I didn't really know anything about American history. And taking this trip made it so much more fascinating. And now American history is something that I really am passionate about at this point, because it's oh, I've been to that place. I saw that train. I saw that first thing that was built. And so it made it real personal. And it's all the cemeteries and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we could tell a zillion stories.
A zillion RV stories. Yeah. No, that sounds great. I love that history piece, like how it was the act of driving around, and because you were bringing in the family history piece, and it just wove its way in there. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So it made it. I mean, it's actually the perfect unschooling example of spending your time doing relevant things. So there were a lot of things I didn't make her study ahead of time, because who cares? Except when we went to the actual places, then suddenly she actually cared, and it became real. And sometimes we had real faces. I mean, we have Mayflower relatives. So when we were at Cape Cod, and we were able to see Constance Hopkins' hat, that I'm like, that's your 12th great grandmother's hat. She wore that. And that's completely different than going to a museum.
Gosh, Plymouth Plantation is so much fun.
Yeah. And seeing things that you don't have a connection to. Yeah. So the years of homework that led to that on my part were really worth it, because I was able to see their eyes widen, I think, more than they may have otherwise.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, speaking of these kind of learning journeys and stories, I was wondering if you guys might be able to share a couple of stories about how learning has unfolded for you in your lives. Because it does. We're going back to that word flow, right? That you were talking about right there in the beginning. It flows right through our days. And I always find that so fascinating. Mm-hmm. You got a story you might like to share too about that?
How it's like evolved?
No, she wants to know so for us, I'll start and then you can.
Yeah, you have to get
if you want to focus just on our learning times have been, because I know that's a real concern for a lot of people who are new to these ideas. You see the most learning happen in our family late at night. Often when the lights are out already, because we have slumber parties.
Yeah.
Or in the car, where we'll just talk and get to where we're going and still sit out in front so we can finish our conversations. Yeah. I'm sure you know exactly. So I think the timing, the most important learning has happened in ways that maybe don't look like learning to conventionally schooled people.
Yeah.
And they might not understand that, no, there were huge epiphanies that just happened in that conversation. And yeah, it was dark and it was 11:30 at night, but those are the conversations that really stay with you.
Yeah, I think the best learning has happened really organically, never when we were like, we're going to sit down and focus on this.
Mm-hmm. It's not something you can plan, is it? It's not something
you can't pin it down.
Yeah. Although, I mean, some of it is choices,
yeah.
For example, so we do read a lot of novels and things like that. But remember, Gwenny's very first book that she ever heard read aloud was Ishmael. Daniel Quinn is her first, because I was reading that to Rhanna at the time. And when we read that book, have you read that book?
Yeah.
Yeah. So good. All of Daniel Quinn, I mean, he kind of summed up a lot of his theories in a book called If They Give You Lined Paper, Write Sideways. That's like our whole family's motto. If there's a reason, if people are all going in one direction, I'm always going to go in a different direction and investigate that direction and just make sure that there isn't some validity to it. I'm just not a lemming. And that is, that's why our family looks so different than everyone else's, because we just utilize our space in life differently. And it's been so much more interesting.
It's hard for me to describe it though, because it's just the way it is.
And you haven't known anything different yet.
And I've never known anything different. And so that's why it's hard for me to answer a question like that, because it's like, how do I describe what is just normal? Like, and I think I've definitely had moments, what do we call them, bubble moments, when I go out into the world and wait, you guys don't do, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Okay, not everyone does that. All right, and then that's my realization going, okay, so not everyone stays up till 11 talking to their mom about
whatever.
Whatever. They need to come up with an example. Because that's just normal for me. So it's hard to define that or describe it, because it is just normal.
I love that. I love that, Ron, because I bet, it's not even like you're just living, like to even label things as learning. It's like, I'm learning because everything I do, I'm making a choice. I'm doing it. I'm seeing what happens. I'm like learning every moment. It's so hard to use that label.
Those kind of learning moments, I feel like I have brought with me into my life outside of our home, where I have some of these crazy deep, sometimes emotional, but like epiphany moments / conversations with my coworkers, where I work in a juice bar and we have these intense conversations yelling over blenders. And then, you have to stop for a second and you have to help someone, and then you go back and then you're like, so then I felt really vulnerable and I didn't understand. But that's what makes it seem like it's not a different thing, because I was able to bring, there was never a transition period between how I've always learned or processed or developed things. I just took it with me.
Yeah.
And it just worked. I mean, I've been really lucky that the people I found in my new community here are really chill and, they're wonderful people. But that was never, where they're like, what are you doing? This isn't how we normally do it. It's just now we're adults having a conversation. And so it's just always been the same.
Although I have noticed since Rhanna and Thane have gone out into the community and are fully functioning adults now, they will come home sometimes and say, that's just us, isn't it? Like that thing, whatever X is. Oh, I didn't know, but that's just us, right? Yeah. And then they check it and I'm like, oh yeah, I should have told you that's just us. Nobody else does it that way.
Last week was parchment paper.
Oh, right. Like,
I went and stayed at my boyfriend's house.
She just assumes everyone bakes with parchment paper all the time, and most people don't even know what it is. But
so I went and stayed at my boyfriend's house.
That's a simple example.
I was like, where's your parchment paper? I need to bake this. And he's like, we don't have any. I was like, you what? We don't have parchment paper. Like, and then I came home, I was like, and they didn't even have parchment paper. He's like, yeah, nobody does. And I was like, what?
Well, that is a really great lead into our next question, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I would love to hear the story behind Miss T-Berry's Baked Goods. Because you guys just hit your first anniversary, didn't you?
We did, our first legitimate one.
First legitimate. So let us know the story behind that. How did that evolve?
So Rhanna and I both have celiac and autoimmune issues. And so our diet has looked different. Of all the things, our diet also looks very different from most people's.
Nothing is
we
normal.
don't do anything normally here. But I grew up baking a lot, and so she grew up as a baby baking, and
because I was on, you were holding me in the sling, the spanakopita picture, like
maybe we'll send that one to you.
Perfect.
So we've probably been we've been learning how to bake differently, gluten-free, but gluten-free, dairy-free, and then for the last 5 years, grain-free,
egg-free.
Yeah, for a long time. This has been a process for us as we deal with our own health issues. Rhanna grew up watching food TV. Like, that was pretty much the only besides Little Bear and maybe Blue's Clues
And Magic School Bus.
and Magic School Bus. The
School
only
Bus.
TV we really had on in the house was Food TV. And she's paying for it now because she doesn't know anything about SpongeBob. Like I was like, you're not watching
No
that.
Kim Possible.
And so her
I
friends
can't
now
even-
are like, you don't even know
The
about
only
it.
reference I look at them really blankly, like SpongeBob, and I was like, I grew up watching Food Network, and they're like, again, they don't judge me for not going to college. They judge me for not knowing SpongeBob.
Yeah, pretty much. So watch out. Pop culture is important to learn. But so she's wanted to be a professional baker since she was about 11. She's talked about wanting to do this. And so, and to be honest, I have wanted to have my own little bakery tea house thing since I was a teenager too. So it's been a melding of the minds, and now we have started Miss Teaberry's baked goods. It's all gluten-free, mostly vegan foods. Miss Teaberry's came from, there's a children's series called Mr. Putter and Tabby. Do you know those?
No.
Cynthia Ryland. Oh, they're so good.
Oh.
It's a whole series about this old man and his cat and his old neighbor lady and her dog, basically. And one thing I love about it is you never see these positive portrayals of older people as just being normal people. It's really heartwarming. But Mrs. Teaberry, who's the neighbor, she's always baking for Mr. Putter. And so at some point, Rhanna was like, I bet she was like me when she was young. And
I want to grow up to be Mrs. Teaberry.
yeah, so that's why we're Miss Teaberries.
Oh, that's awesome.
So and see, there's the like validating reference of a child's book as like, to me, I love that the thing we're creating is kind of has a foundation in a small children's easy reader. Like, I love it because I just think that there's validity in everything. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it's going really well, and our well, do you want to talk about like why it's important that we do it?
So we wanted to start this because since we have so many food issues, and this has become more of an issue for me as I've been going out and meeting people and stuff, I can't ever go out and eat with my friends. Mm-hmm. I can't go to a restaurant and eat food and feel like I'm safe. Like, there's a handful of them, but even then it's like, okay, I can get this one thing and it's such a big deal. It's almost not worth it.
Yeah.
Or just going out, I always bring my own food. And so somebody is always uncomfortable. Like, well, I don't want to share your food because that's your food and you can't get anything else later, or it separates it. And I've always believed that food is what brings people together. You break bread together with people, and it's a very social thing. When you eat with someone, you trust them, and then you grow closer and you bond over food. And so not being able to bond over food has been like a big gap that is a really hard thing to work past. So kind of our goal with Miss Teaberry's is someday we want to have our own location and our own bakery that has all these different options. So if you're gluten-free and your friend's dairy-free or whatever, 2 or more people can come in and you can all sit down. You can all get something to eat that's safe for you. You can all bond over food, and no one has to worry that they're going to be sick for the next week or they're going to have a headache in 5 minutes if, that there was cross-contamination, or that you can just relax and you can eat food with your friends and it's not a big deal. There's no big deal that, well, that's gluten-free and this isn't, or, well, this has nuts and this is, it's not a big deal. It's not a stress thing. Yeah. It's just, you just sit down and eat and it's just normal food. So,
except it's not normal food.
It's
delicious.
It's better.
And beautiful.
Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful.
Did
I mentioned I was stalking you guys before the call. Wow, your food is beautiful.
Thank you. And so that's important to us. Like, we put flowers on most of our food and try to make it beautiful, because for a lot of people who have different allergies and intolerances, it's like the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
It's the food is kind of gross, it's dry, or it doesn't have flavor, and you don't have a lot of options. And so people should just be able to feel like human beings when they go out in public.
One of the big things too is, especially we focus on like birthdays and little kids, because it's been something we've dealt with before, where we've had birthdays where you don't have any dessert for your birthday.
Or you go to someone else and they're having a party and you're like, thanks, but I can't eat that. Well, that's one thing for an adult to do that, but for a child to constantly say that they can't partake is really super sad. Yeah. So sometimes we'll have people who just buy like half a dozen cupcakes or something that they send with their child to someone else's party so that they have something to
the latest one we did, the parents kind of all got together and we just sent them like, I think it was when they sent them plain ones or something, and they were gonna all decorate them so they all looked the same. So the little kids didn't feel like, well, this is mine and this is yours. Right. They all looked the same. The parents just knew they were getting the same option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
you focus on mental health as well as physical health.
Yeah, because we do feel like there's a psychological and an emotional component to eating, obviously. Yeah. That needs to be addressed. So to us, we're not making health food. It's sugary and you shouldn't eat it every day. We're not telling anyone you should eat our food every single day. There are people that do, but we would never say that it's physical health food, but it feeds your soul so that everyone should be able to have a special occasion and feel like they're getting a treat that is actually pretty and delicious.
You're already dealing with things like celiac or autoimmune. You're in a lot of pain. Yeah. You're dealing with a lot of crappy things, and you're dealing, being tired or the emotional side of just not feeling like your body doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So you deserve to eat a donut once a week when you have a really bad day.
Sometimes
that doesn't make it worse.
From people who say, this is the first donut I've had in 10 years.
Yeah.
They're almost in tears
just
because
kids.
It's an experience, and then we just lose it.
Yeah. We've heard stories about little kids and they're like, they've been sick since they were born. They've never had it. And this was their very first donut they ever had. You're like,
turning it in.
We good.
I can die happy now. That's the whole, we just want to help.
You're opening up choices, right? These are choices they haven't been able to make.
The news is so full of crappy happenings that it's like, it's so hard to even take it in at this point. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to feel overwhelmed in that, like, what can I do? There's nothing I can do. And Rhanna and I have decided to just try to focus on how can we make how can we make our world a better place? And if all that means is allowing someone to be happy eating a donut for the first time, then we've done something, to bring some joy into the world. So, and that really sums up our whole unschooling journey as a family, is I'm just looking after my own learner, and I'm trying to make the world a better place by making these 6 people that I have any actual influence over into the most joyful, most loving people I can, and hopefully that will radiate out. That's all I can hope for.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love the focus on joy, and I was actually having a really interesting conversation with my eldest yesterday. We were talking about the difference between, happiness and joy, and not to dishonor happiness or anything like that, but, the surface level versus, that when we focus on joy, tough things can still happen in our lives, right? And we can still walk through these things, and they will happen. Absolutely. Absolutely. But, when we're looking at that deeper joy and fulfillment that we're walking towards in our days, it helps so much, doesn't it? It's a mindset to bring to your day every day that helps you make that next choice. right? Let's make that next
really
choice. It will bring joy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to decide on it.
You have to decide to be happy. And that's something if I find myself like feeling overwhelmed or something, or because now I bake all the time. We're real busy. So I find myself, if I'll get overwhelmed or stressed out, or I'll be really exhausted, I'll be like, but I have to make this. I have to bake this batch of things. I have to get it done. And I just feel like so much weight. And I go, wait, no. You get to make this thing. You're really lucky. You get to bake for a living. This is really cool. You got to focus on that side. And then as soon as I switch back in that, it becomes an enjoyable thing to do. But it takes a lot of mental energy to maintain that. Like, remember, this is a good thing.
Yeah, it's
you have to do that work.
But you have to do that with everything in life, because it's so easy to be like, well, the world sucks. I keep doing it. Well, you could actually do this. It's maintaining that. I use an example of the baking, but it applies to the rest of your life.
Yeah. And it's
being aware of what you're doing and what your vibes you're putting out into the world. This
is probably the most fulfilling part of the journey so far for me is watching my two oldest ones enter the world. So when people are new to the unschooling ideas, there's a lot of, but what ifs that all the naysayers want to bring out. And none of them have been true for us. Nothing. I never made my kids get up at the crack of dawn. My kids have always slept in as long as they needed to sleep. And Rhanna's a baker, so she gets up in the summer. She gets up, and is making deliveries at 6 a.m. every day. And when she trained as a pastry chef, you were up at 4:30 every day, and she could do it. Yeah. It's just another thing to do. Like, she didn't need practice. She didn't have to suffer for 13 years of her childhood to learn how to wake up early.
I know.
Right? And so the idea that you have to prepare your kids for a horrible world by treating them horribly does not ring true for me at all. I feel just the opposite, that by building them up and giving them as much joy and positivity as we could, because our house was not always full of joy. Yeah. We had a lot of stress and trauma in our house for years at a time, but I didn't have to manufacture that. That happened.
Yeah. Right.
And like you and I just said, life is going to keep happening to you. So in my opinion, if your foundation is strong and you know that you have a family who's always going to be there as a safety net, or just as a support when life does suck, because there are times that it's going to in every single person's life, then they're going to be fully equipped to deal with whatever life throws at them, because they're strong and stable and they have a really
good foundation.
Yeah. So we didn't practice making their lives miserable.
Here.
Yeah. And then, so like Rhanna says, though, it's not that sometimes she doesn't have a hard day, or
absolutely,
like everybody, but she has the ability to self-regulate, and she might spend a day being grumpy or something, but then by the next morning she's like, I don't need to do that. I'm actually quite happy in my choices, because they're her choices and no one has made those decisions for her.
Exactly. When you feel like you're in control of your life, it's different. You don't feel like, life's happening to you and you have no choice in the matter. Yeah. Right. Crappy things can happen in your life and around you and everything. But, you get to the point where you remember you're in control of yourself and you have choices and you can make that next choice. Like you were talking about before, Rhanna, like talking yourself through, well, I don't have to look at it as in, man, I have to make this, I have to get this done. I can choose to switch it up, see the bigger picture, and remember that this is a choice and that I get to do this, and that this is something I enjoy doing in the bigger picture, even though you're really exhausted after hours of it.
I'm so tired. But it is nice to always know I have the choice.
Yeah.
which I think is, again, probably one of those things that's hard to like identify or describe, or even imagine that other people were raised not having a choice, because I've always had a choice. I've always gotten to choose what time I go to sleep or what I want to eat, or even the most basic things. So as you ramp up to get bigger choices, I trust myself and know what I can do or what I'm comfortable with to make that choice, or if I need to push myself. And so I'm very comfortable in making bigger choices when it comes down to it, as well as little choices.
I think we've just seen that. We'll not use names, but so, I mean, today a big topic of conversation is consent for all types of things. But, you know, compulsory education and all of the compulsory things that go along with that, bedtimes and hygiene, or like what all the things that you have to then force your children to do, really cuts down on the amount of consent children have over their daily lives, like when they pee and when they have a meal. And to me, like what I'm seeing now is the ripple effect out from that is, I've always told my kids, you shouldn't do something that doesn't make you happy. So if we signed them up for a class because they really just had to learn how to do whatever, and then they don't really like it, it's not like I'm going to make them keep doing it. And Rhanna she's been working in a job for the last few years that she loved. She just loved it. She loved all the people, and it was
my home away from home. It was like I left this nest and kind of jumped over to that one.
Yeah.
I got to practice spreading my wings.
But then there's been a change of ownership, and that place has
a lot of people left.
Not a good place to work. And she's comfortable making the decision to leave that job for one that's going to, because mostly she's a baker, but she does work some hours outside of the house.
Which is because, you know,
for spending money.
And I started working there when we moved here before we started the baking.
She puts every cent of the baking money into a savings account so she can open an actual bakery someday. So we don't spend a lot of money. She has more money in savings than any other 22-year-old I know, but she always acts like she has no money. It's hilarious. But it's not, to her, it's already spent on a structure that doesn't exist yet.
It's not mine. It's Caesar's.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong to me.
In any case, she felt comfortable leaving one job for another job that will be better emotionally. And I mean, it pays a lot less, but she was pointing out the other night, this is the second time she's left one job for a job that pays less, but is better for her. Yeah. And, I'm not sure, you know, I'm supposed to want her to be successful, but to me, success doesn't equal money. And I'm so proud of her for being able to take care of her spirit, and not be worn down by the world, and be able to make those choices. And that comes back to that issue of self-esteem and self-confidence and the self-agency to do what's right for yourself, which I think a lot of people don't know how to do because they haven't had any practice doing that.
And the thing to add to that, which kind of goes along the lines of people going, you're homeschooled, you're so lucky, is all of the times I've ever left jobs because I wasn't happy or I was getting sick, all of the people's reactions when I told them I was leaving was, congratulations, that's great, you're taking care of yourself, that's really cool. Yeah. No one was like, you're leaving, what's wrong with you, that's a better job, you should stay. They're like, I got so many congratulations. But even last summer, you know, I left.
People truly do want what's best for you.
Yeah, but it's something that they don't necessarily think about themselves
to do for themselves.
Prioritizing themselves. And so when they see someone else do it, they're like, that's a good thing, you should do that. Like, so that's been the reaction when I leave those jobs is, congratulations, good for you.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating to see that they can see it in someone else, but they can't see it for themselves because, like you said, that's not something that they've they've ever had experience with, right?
Right.
Up,
they've never had the option to have a choice.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
yeah, I think people don't realize how many choices they actually have.
Yeah. Yeah, that's spectacular.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. It was so much fun. Thank you.
It was fun. It was really great to meet you face to face.
Yes. I really appreciate you both taking the time too. And it was so nice to start hearing some of those stories behind some of the pictures and things that I saw. Now, before we go, can you let people know where good places for them to connect with you online?
So you can find Miss T-Berries at misstberries.com.
We're on Facebook and Instagram, and technically Snapchat, but I don't know how to use that.
I will definitely recommend people go check out Facebook and Instagram and drool over the pictures, you guys. That's definitely beautiful work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're really proud of it.
Thanks so much for taking the time. It was so great to get to know you a little bit face to face. I hope we talk again soon. Bye.
Me too.
Very soon.
Bye.
Bye.